Nine times out of 10, we are causing our own burnout. And, it isn't conscious, it's not even intentional per se. I don't think that people who are high performance people who burn out are bad people by any stretch. At least I used to think I was at one point, but I've come around. And but we do cause our own burnout. This is both the horrible truth and the wonderful truth.
Hey guys, before we get started, I have one quick favor to ask of you. Can you please hit the subscribe button so that more people can find the show? Thank you. Scott, I'm sure you're familiar with this, and I've seen this with many coaches I've had on the podcast where we fall into this pattern of we hit burnout and we either have a rock bottom moment or we have just a realization that something needs to change. And somewhere along that journey of making the change and the growth, there's this step where we say we want to help others or we want to stop others from feeling the way that we did. And that's what leads us into coaching. Do you feel that your journey is somewhat similar, that you followed the same pattern of, hitting a rock bottom moment, and somewhere along your growth journey you decided the best thing to do is to go help others?
Yeah, I would say my first experience with hiring a coach, I was running a business that was doing very well. And my frustration was not burnout at that point. It was more just sort of feeling like entrepreneurs do sometimes, sort of a lull and not being very comfortable with the lull. And I hired a coach pretty much sight unseen, and I didn't really know what a coach did. And what I found was that in 90 days, we had covered more ground. I had accomplished more than I had in a couple of years prior to that. And I was just astounded at the fact that we were able to make together so much more progress, so much faster than I imagined was possible. And that was the first thing that I really wanted to bring others was just that feeling of acceleration, that not only could you be unstuck, but that you could move at a rate and at a pace and with an ambition and a vision that was way grander, I suppose, than what I had even imagined. So to begin with, it was that I wanted to give people the experience of moving so much farther and faster than they imagined possible. When it came to burnout recovery, yes, it was very much what you described, that I was in such despair personally. And I was also, as a therapist, working with clients and as a coach, working with clients that were going through a similar uh, process. But mainly it started with being very desperate to get out of my own little trap.
And when you say that you were in that trap, was that something that you had been in for a while, let's say in a loop, or was it something that when you were in that moment you recognized it for what it was? Because for a lot
Well,
of people they don't recognize straight away.
yes. Well, I think that one of the biggest problems with burnout is that the very things that have made most overachievers successful are the things which cause burnout. And in a crisis, as they say, to the hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so we figure, even though I'm exhausted and overwhelmed and it's not working anymore, I'm going to continue to hammer away at overachieving and working harder and worrying more. And so I think that's what most people do with burnout. That's what I definitely did, was that I would just retreat to the things that had worked in the past. So I'd work harder, worry more, achieve more, stress myself and others out more, until one day I realized, and I did have sort of an epiphany, that I was so exhausted that I was afraid that I was not going to be able to get out of bed. I mean, it finally reached the point where I had had this debate with myself in bed for several mornings. Boy, I hope it doesn't get to the point where I can't get out of bed. But it finally reached this sort of existential moment where I realized there is a chance that I won't be able to get out of bed this morning. And if I can't get out of bed, then a whole cascade of very bad things are going to happen. Um, it triggered all of my worst fears, I suppose, that my career would fall apart, my persona would fall apart, my identity would fall apart, my ability to be a father, husband, provider, etc. The whole the whole catastrophe would collapse under its own weight. That was really the moment of truth for me, I think, and I've experienced this with lots of our clients over time, is that they reach this moment where they realize that if that I'm at risk of the whole thing falling apart. And sort of in tandem with that, the fear that other people are going to begin to start noticing that I am just mailing this in, that it's everything I can do to get out of bed every day. And when I do get to work or into whatever performance environment I'm in, I am, it's beyond imposter syndrome. I'm just, I'm barely able to sort of fake getting through the day. And sooner or later, that's going to become obvious to everybody, not just to me, but this thing I'm trying to conceal is going to be obvious to everybody. And it's a combination of those two things, I think, that this moment of exposure is going to happen. And also this moment of sort of penultimate failure where the wheels fall off the bus completely.
Yeah, so it's like reaching a point of being found out for what you are,
Mm,
and
yes.
the fear of that coming to light.
It's very much, yeah, I think that's a lot of it. There's this, what I've seen in myself and in the thousands of folks that we've worked with is that there's this persona which isn't real, but there's a persona that we build up, and we can go down a Freudian rabbit hole trying to sort of sort this out. But anyway, there's this persona that we have, and the bedrock foundation of it is that if I work harder and try harder and care more and take on more responsibility, that good things will inevitably happen, or at a minimum, the status quo will be preserved. It's only when there's some doubt about that, I think, and that was the epiphany for me, where I began to experience a lot of doubt that that my bag of tricks, my superpowers, were going to be able to support me anymore, because I was trying everything I knew how to try, which was basically work harder and worry more, and it wasn't working. And I had to concede that there was a better than 50-50 chance that one day soon I wasn't going to be able to get out of bed. And then, yes, the whole collapse would occur.
It's kind of like the law of diminishing efforts, where it works to a certain extent, let's say for
Yes,
a couple of years, and next thing, as the worry and the stress builds up, and the negative effects of working to that level for so long, and maybe the bad habits that you've picked up along the way. I know that when I was going through it, and I noticed my energy levels were starting to wane over time, I needed to compensate for that lack of energy. So I
yes,
turned to, okay, I was like drinking more coffee. I was drinking Monster
yes,
Energy. I was stacking up.
yes,
I was buying in bulk. So I had about 24 cans in the back of my car, and I
yes,
normalized that. People would be like, "Why are you buying so many cans?" And I said, "Oh, I need it to get through my day at work. This is just how I work." And
yes,
I normalized
yes,
that behavior. But over time, getting desensitized to caffeine, that wasn't enough. Okay, I turned to getting scoops of tubs of pre-workout for the gym, and I was dry
yes,
scooping that on my lunch breaks and normalizing that behavior. And over time, of course, this was all having negative impacts on my body. But because I was normalizing this behavior as the new standard for me to have energy and capacity, there's going to come a point where the body can no longer cope with that.
yes, yes. And the other coping mechanisms, I mean, there's definitely an addictive component to all of this. And to sort of keep I don't know, to keep this bizarre lifestyle going, we're willing to push almost anything across the table. And like you, I mean, it's caffeine and it's sugar and it's anything protein, anything I can get my hands on. But sooner or later, and this especially, when we're younger, especially when we're single, we can pull all-nighters and we can do a lot of things that both our bodies and our lifestyles will allow us to do. But if you add a significant other, or if you add children, and if as a natural consequence of all this effort, you've accumulated more responsibility. This doesn't scale on a very fundamental level, on a business level. This effort doesn't scale. It can't work. It's doomed to failure. And most of us ignore that because it has worked. It's like a magic wand, which has worked perfectly for years. But we begin to realize, we begin to see that it cannot work going forward, that the superpowers have not only they're not working, but they're kryptonite now. And we begin to feel the toll in our relationships, in our work performance, particularly work relationships. And, one of my clients said to me famously, it seems like my choice is to succeed at home or to succeed at work, and that I must pick one. I cannot have both. And this is again, one of those sort of existential choices that a lot of us face. And I've had a number of clients who have sacrificed relationships with significant others, with children, ultimately with workmates, even with customers and investors. Uh, they've sacrificed all of that on the altar of kind of keeping this persona going that I can do it. And the things that sustained me for years, that old magic wand, will continue to work if I just manage better. And that's the component that's the most like addiction. Uh, it's the idea, the alcoholic might say that, if I switch from scotch to brandy, or if I'm more careful about the way I drink, then I will be able to drink like a gentleman. And it's very similar in what amounts to workaholism. Um, that one day we're going to find the key. It used to work. It should work again, and I will find that. But unfortunately, many of us lose our health and our sanity, our families, and a lot of other things if we push it to the limit.
That standard that is, let's say, people who are striving for careers, who want to be in the C suite and they feel family. And I have seen people who feel that it's one or the other. They have no option.
Yes,
And it's like, okay, do I want to strive to keep progressing on the ladder, or do I want to start a family? And oftentimes they feel that there's no room for balance there, that they need to
yes,
sacrifice one for the other.
exactly.
Is that something that's just across the board, for like corporate culture, that one must choose one or the other if they want to meet a certain standard?
Well, pardon me, so much of it depends on the corporation. And there are certainly instances where the culture is such that the standard is to sacrifice everything. And we all know of companies and corporations where everything must be sacrificed to EBITDA, for example, or quarterly performance or whatever. And then we have to make a decision about whether we want to do that or not. Um, and I won't say that that's the standard against all corporations everywhere, but it's certainly present. And oddly, my experience is that for every one client I meet that's in a culture like that, there are nine clients that are just as much in burnout who are not in a culture like that. That nine times out of 10, we are causing our own burnout. And it isn't conscious, it's not even intentional per se. I don't think that people who are high performance people who burn out are bad people by any stretch. At least I used to think I was at one point, but I've come around. And but we do cause our own burnout. This is both the horrible truth and the wonderful truth. If we had to wait for our customers to change, our coworkers to change, the economy or our industries or whatever to change, it could be a very long wait. So, it begs the question, if those things aren't going to change, then maybe I have to. If we're in a corporate culture that is genuinely toxic or is asking you to make more of a trade-off than you're willing to make, well, then we have to decide. But again, it's on us. We have to decide whether we're willing to pay the price or not. But again, my experience, having worked with thousands of super high performance professionals and CEOs and business owners is that 9 times out of 10, we're causing our own burnout. And that there are certainly the outlying corporations that or cultures that we should run away from, screaming. Do it today if you're in that situation. Run away screaming. But my experience is that it's not usually the case.
I'm glad you agree with me on that because I hear it a lot that people always blame the big bad boss. They always blame, oh, it's the company that's dragging me down. But oftentimes, yes, there are the few that do set that standard, but oftentimes people just have that narrative in their head. And
Yes,
it's they're setting that standard themselves. It's their own narrative that is
exactly.
setting that standard. And oftentimes, because they're setting that bar for themselves, and they don't communicate with others, then they don't know what the real standard is expected of them. And if they don't know their own values, if they don't know their own standards and boundaries, and they don't set any, then people are going to say, "Oh well, if Eugene always goes above and beyond, we'll keep on trusting Eugene to keep on going above and beyond, and not
Yes,
ask him why,
exactly.
and don't ask questions."
Yes.
So, and the one thing that I always get people to start with is understanding where their values are, or understanding
Yes.
themselves, because oftentimes people always say that burnout is a workplace phenomenon. It's not a phenomenon. It's not, and they always say, "Oh, it has to do with too much of a workload," and it's not to do with the workload. It's your relationship with the work, because as you said, not everyone burns out. High achievers seem more prone to burnout because of their relationship with the work.
Mhm. Yes, I would say that's true. There's I mean, at its core, I think it was David Thoreau who said that men lead lives of quiet desperation, and so do women. And so it is very, very quiet. The higher up you succeed. And again, and I think we should forgive ourselves. This all comes naturally. Nobody sets out to burn out or to sacrifice relationships or their health or anything like that. It's a very understandable phenomenon, I think, or whatever it is, life choice that we get into the situation because we're rewarded by going the extra mile, by always being willing to take on more. You're rewarded, and rewards feel good, and we don't think about them, and no one else thinks about them, and we just move on, and it becomes part of our identity, and our ego likes that, and our pocketbook likes that, and so on. So it's not even all that subtle what happens. The problem becomes, and this is where I think there's a parallel with addiction, is that we begin to think, well, if I change the outside world, then my inside world will change. So, for example, I've had clients tell me, well, I just need a week's vacation. The illusion in the United States is that every 50 weeks we take 2 weeks of vacation, and that should do it. The science, of course, is completely contrary to this. This is exactly not how to recover from burnout, and exactly not how it's to the contrary. It can cause more stress than working. But that's the commonly held illusion. I've had clients who have taken sabbaticals. I have a client in Poland who's one of my favorite people who took a 6 month sabbatical. Lovely, lovely person. And her thought, I think, like anybody's, would be, well, 6 months, certainly in 6 months' time, I can recover my health and my well-being and so forth. But what I found in case after case after case is that most people return from vacations and sabbaticals worse off with respect to burnout than they were before. And they face this sort of terrifying truth that it's me, that I am the problem, um, and that it's my approach, my relationship, as you say. Um, it's unfortunately, and this is what makes this so difficult, I think. In a way, it's very simple to break through burnout, and in other ways, it's almost impossible. And the almost impossible part is that this all used to work very, very well. All this overachieving, all this taking on more, perfectionism, whatever you want to call it, worked very, very, very well. And we see it appear to work with impunity for other people. They don't seem to have the trouble I'm having. Their home life seems to be fine. Of course, we don't know what they're like. Um, so, I think we're to be forgiven for sort of falling into the trap that this should work. Why isn't this working? It used to work. Um, I always think personally, I think of reaching that sort of this existential moment where I was afraid I couldn't go to work as a huge blessing because, it turns out that almost everything that I thought was correct as far as it went, and particularly when I was 20 or 25 or 30 years old. But, as I moved up in my career and as I took on some of the benefits of success, including significant other and family, it just wouldn't scale. It cannot work. It's doomed to failure. And it was a real blessing to me, though I felt like it almost killed me. It was a huge blessing to discover that almost everything I knew to be true was wrong. And not the least of it was the idea that, well, if I just get a good night's sleep, or if I take a week's vacation, or if I even take a sabbatical, I've had clients who've sold businesses, gotten divorced, taken some very drastic means to recover from or escape burnout, all to discover that, like so many things, it's an inside job entirely, and that the solution to it is much more simple, but it's just dramatically counterintuitive. It couldn't be more 180 degrees away from what most of us have bet our lives is a workable solution. And in fact, we've had the rewards to prove that it was workable to a point. So the solutions are not complicated. They're very well documented. There's lots of research, but they're about as counterintuitive as they can possibly be. For example, instead of taking a 2-week vacation or a good night's sleep, even, the science of burnout says that we need to take miniature vacations throughout the day, 5 or 10 second vacations. Now, this is counterintuitive because to take the eye off the ball for even 5 seconds feels suicidal to the compulsively burned out person. But that's the research, that's the data, and that's what I found to be true with thousands of clients, is that taking a mini vacation 5 or 10 times a day and actually face the fact that you're overwhelmed, face the fact that you're stuck in only 5 minutes time, and to fully release it and to really let it go is the solution. I mean, it's more than that, obviously, but that's a good sort of uh, example, I guess, of how counterintuitive and how simple the solution is. But it's something that no one would ever do who's an overachiever because we cannot afford 5 seconds, especially not 5 seconds multiple times a day. If you ask someone to meditate for 15 minutes, you will lose them instantly. So even 5 seconds uh, multiple times a day, I've had very intelligent, very suffering people say, "Oh, I can't do that. That's impossible." And yet that is the answer. To actually be with the thing we're afraid of instead of trying to work past it is the answer. But you have to be in a lot of pain to even consider that.
I guess it comes the cost also. It's like you could either take your 25-second breaks throughout the day now, or run the risk of spiraling into burnout and facing a 6 month sabbatical as because that's what they see as the only alternative. For me,
Yes.
when I hit rock bottom with burnout, I was told take 4 weeks off work. Take 4 weeks off, sort yourself out.
Yes.
You'll be back to normal in 4 weeks' time. And it was given to me that like it was just like a proposition of this is burnout. I was like, I didn't have a clue what burnout was. I was only 27 years old. And it was like, this is burnout. Google it, figure out what it is, and
Yes.
you'll be over it in 4 weeks' time. I looked up on Google what burnout was. I saw everything that Google recommended to help cure burnout. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to do running, I'm going to do all this exercise, I'm going to try mindfulness, whatever this thing is. And I just took like 40 things on, made a checklist. Okay, I'm going to go through every single one of these every day.
Yes.
And the first week completely exhausted myself
Yeah.
trying as a high achiever to overachieve and speed run through burnout to try and cure
Yes,
it in an effort to get rid of this thing. The last
exactly.
thing I wanted to do was take a step back and self reflect and figure it out, or do the internal work to figure this out. And that took much longer. That took up to 3 years, because
Yes.
that's the last thing you want to do as a high achiever. You don't want to look within. As you said, you want to immerse yourself in the work. Don't deal with the feelings, the worries, the anxieties. I feel good when I go to work. I feel good when I'm productive. I feel good
Yes.
when I see the results and outcomes.
Well, and it's, I mean, a heroin addict feels good when they shoot heroin. It's exactly the same thing. And in fact, it's a different set of chemistry, but it amounts to the same thing. And so we do what we are addicted to, um, and also what has really worked. So it's not surprising. But it is true that we would say in the United States an expression is that people who are very resilient will just they'll have a problem or a challenge or a fear and they'll rub dirt on it and keep moving. This is sort of an expression for to convey grit or whatever. And basically, the strategy that most of us use is either to plunge in and try to fix the problem or to avoid the problem, to either fight the problem or to flee the problem. But both will make burnout worse. So, it begs the question, as you say, you can speed run into burnout recovery, but that doesn't work. Um, and but avoiding it doesn't work because that got you where you were. So it begs the question, what the hell do we do? And, fortunately, there are some very well documented, proven solutions that do not require, although you certainly can go down the Freudian rabbit hole and, and learn more about yourself. And I had to take a long time to do that. But what my experience and the experience of our clients is that in a matter of 10 days, by doing some and less than that, usually 5 days, but in 5 days, you can really begin to turn this thing around and begin to see hope by taking some very, very simple, practical actions that don't require you to uh, quit your job, leave your industry, sell your business, divorce your wife or husband, or anything like that. The changes are at the other end of the telescope. They are micro changes, not macro changes, and yet they have a macro effect. For example, the mini vacations that I mentioned, one of the things that we prescribe for all of our clients, uh, and I'll just add, we have one of the things that we want to do to help any of your listeners who want help right this second. We have a website called fastfixcall.com. And if you go to fastfixcall.com, you'll be scheduled with one of our coaches for a very fast 10 or 15-minute call. And we'll understand your case and give you 2 or 3 interventions you can start using right now today. It does not have to be complicated. You don't have to sit for years on a therapist's couch. And as a therapist, I say that with uh, I don't know, some confidence. But you can really begin to turn this thing around in a very short amount of time by taking some very practical, microscopic actions. And I think the fear that most of us have is, well, I'll have to sit on a mountaintop for months and years, or I'll have to sit on a psychiatrist's couch or a therapist's couch for years. And it really is not true. The answers are much simpler, much more practical. They're just very counterintuitive. Um, so, for example, one of the simplest and most effective techniques, the first one that I discovered personally, we call the R&R technique. And I'd be happy I'll put it in the show notes, a link to this training. It takes maybe 5 minutes to do the training and 5 seconds to do the work. But basically, all it is to notice that you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, upset, whatever it is. Notice that you're disturbed. Just notice it, not trying to figure it out and not trying to solve it, not trying to fight it and not try to avoid it, but just to notice that you're overwhelmed. And that in itself is incredibly powerful medicine because it's the most counterintuitive thing that we as overachievers can do, to actually be in the moment of realizing, oh my God, I don't feel good. And you don't have to go any farther than that. You don't have to understand why or anything else for right now. Just to feel it physically. Notice where in your body you're feeling disturbed. And most of us instantly can find something. a twinge in the chest. Often it's in the gut, the neck, the throat. Someplace there is a physical allegory to the disturbance. And just to find it and notice it for a second, literally a second, then to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth and allow that tension to leave. This takes 5 seconds tops. And yet it is, and there's mountains of research that demonstrate why this is effective, as counterintuitive and as simplistic as it sounds. But this was the only technique that I stumbled on trying to do research and Google things. It was the first thing that I stumbled on. And within 5 days, I noticed a dramatic difference. And it was enough of a difference that I began to think, there may be some simpler things that are possible. And so I would offer this to anybody listening to this call. It's not you really can break through burnout, and it does not have to take years. In fact, it can take days or weeks. And number one, that's the number one thing. There is hope. You can do this. We've worked with the most overachiever, obstinate, smartest guy in the room, people you can imagine, and it's worked for all of them. That's number one. Number two, the fear is, well, yes, okay, I'll dial my life down to room temperature, but then I won't be able to have much of a life. I won't be able to excel at work. I won't be able to have any adventure in my life. I won't be able to earn or achieve or do. And the opposite is true. The exact opposite is true. That if you want your career to thrive, if you want your relationships with whomever to thrive, if you really want to achieve whatever brass ring you may imagine for yourself, the only way to do that is to break through burnout once and for all and to live a different way. And it's not a 180-degree, it's maybe a 2 or 3 degree course change. It's microscopic, but the results are macroscopic. So, number one, you can recover. Anyone can. The process is remarkably simple and very well proven, and you could do so quickly without meditating, if that's your greatest fear, or without going on sabbatical. Secondly, however you define success in your life is achievable and much more so. We have a program called Beyond Burnout for our graduates, and that's the whole question. Now that we've recovered from burnout, what else is possible? And it turns out that it's just incredible what's possible. It's not that you're limiting yourself, it's that you're finally freeing yourself to be all the things that you can be. It's just that now there's a viable way to actually do that and not kill yourself and not ruin your relationships.
I love the second step you mentioned there, where people they're living in that bubble of high achieving, always on the go, 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 and it's like this is how I work. This is how I'm successful. It's because I'm putting in these hours, and they mistake success for that being in the high alert, fight or flight
Yes,
mode, six
exactly.
coffees a day, God knows what else, to stay in that high cortisol, high stress state, because that's what they
Yes,
think success is. It's to be hyper focused. They think they're being hyper focused in that state, but they have no. That's not a high performing state. That's not the flow state as we see. It's
yes,
when you take a step back and you say, I can do the same level of work in a calm state where I'm not flying off the seat of my pants every day, where I'm not erratically running around the office, where I'm not literally sweating, running around the
yes,
office every day, and I can do it from a calm state. That's a more respectful, assertive, authoritative leader state. That
exactly.
and it's understanding the difference. The same amount of work, the same outcomes can be achieved both in that high state and in a calm state. More than likely, the sustainable state of being in that calm state and learning how to be in that grounded state will achieve better results. You will probably make more correct or more or better decisions in that calm
Yes,
state than you are if you're flying off the handle and making very quick decisions and then firefighting your way around the office, solving
exactly.
problems that you created.
Yes, almost always. Yes, I call it the pyromaniac firefighter, who causes the problems only to have the satisfaction of putting them out. But again, this really is the whole vicious cycle you describe is an addiction cycle, but we mistake the state of being excited or hyper aroused or to be in a ultra uh, cortisol state as the same thing as being successful. And when we're in our 20s and we have very little experience, very little feedback, the only feedback we're getting is, boy, does Eugene work hard, let's give him more reward and responsibility, then it works. But until you're 27, let's say, and then it doesn't. And I live in Omaha, Nebraska, in the United States, where billionaire Warren Buffett lives. And in Omaha, everybody can quote Warren Buffett. It's very funny. Anyway, one of the things he says is that the difference between rich people and very rich people is that very rich people can say no better than rich people do. And what it really comes down to is scale. I mean, simply put, whether it's in business, we can't, the illusion that we can have it all is silly. And it comes back to values. Again, we have to make choices. The idea that we can operate at a 27-year-old level, the same energy and the same time that we did when we were single and with no children and no other community connections and so forth, is just silly. So as you say, it does come back to values, and it really does depend on, what are the things where I excel? It's not everything. There are two or three areas where I excel, and that's where I need to spend my time. And I need to shed everything else that anyone else can do better, faster, and cheaper than I can. Really the key is shedding, not doing more. It's doing less. It's not and we learn this as time goes by, that it's not a question of how many hours you put in, but how much impact you have. The problem is that we get addicted to this idea that I have to be a whirlwind and I have to address everything, and that I cannot afford to discriminate between what's important and what's really important. Um, and this is the addiction. And but it won't scale, it won't work. And no matter how many vacations or sabbaticals we take, inevitably we'll find that everything plateaus and then begins to go down the other way.
We mentioned about your turning your toxic superpowers into your greatest assets. Is that in the aspect of the being a high achiever and the things that spiral you that you can turn
Well,
around to
no,
superpowers?
I
Or
mean, what happens is that, we find some things that work typically early in our careers, and we do them and do them and do them, and we outgrow them, but we don't realize that we've outgrown them. And the superpowers, particularly the superpower of never saying no and being a perfectionist and et cetera, and not discriminating between what's important and what's really important, those things really serve us for a while until they really stop serving us. As we become more realistic and hopefully survive burnout, one of the things we realize is that we look at what has impact, genuine impact for ourselves and others, not what occupies our time or keeps us busy or keeps us in a high cortisol state that we're addicted to, but rather what does actually move the needle in the areas that we value most. So, completely agree with your earlier statement about values. A big part of the burnout breakthrough process is to recalibrate. And instead of sacrificing everything on the altar of maintaining a cortisol state, which is really what it boils down to, we begin to look at what matters? What do I care about? We go through a values exercise with our clients. It's not about moral values. We'll assume that everybody is moral enough for their own good, but values in the sense of what makes life to you, and having an existential moment, especially having a health threat or having your primary relationship threatened or your occupation threatened, is often what it takes for us to be able to back up and think and to begin to discriminate what really does matter, what matters to me, what matters to the people I care about, and to kind of right size ourselves. Most people, even the most brilliant, do two or three things, maybe two, better than other people can. They don't do 20 things better than everybody else. It's usually two or three things that we call genius zone. And the to not only have the greatest impact, whether at work or at home, has a lot to do with determining what do I care about, what part of my life and my work do I love, and where do I offer people the most value, where do I help people the most, and then to be humble enough to shed everything that isn't that, because there are in my life I'm surrounded by people who do things better, faster, and cheaper than I can, and every day I find another person like that, I it's a great day. It's getting to the point where I hardly do anything. There's only one or two things really in a day. And if I do them, life is good. But if I pretend that I should do someone else's job, things don't go well. So that's really it. And values are really the key to it. But if, a lot of us are afraid in the beginning to even look at that because the fear is, well, I can't choose. I have to say yes to everything. I must say yes to everything. Everything that comes up, I must say yes to. Or and we never usually examine it beyond that. But the wheels in my life will fall off if I say no to anything. So it takes some microscopic action to very gently, very, very gently help us see that it's not fatal to say no. In fact, the way out is ultimately in a very gradual, discriminating way to understand what we care about and to begin to say no and to begin to shed the things that are killing us.
I guess when people are learning to say no, they there's always people they think in the extreme. They think that, oh, if I'm saying no, it means I'm saying no to everything, or I'm saying no. And it once you explain, it's like you're saying no, but it's let's say if you're being brought, if someone is crossing a boundary and you say no, but you don't. Some people don't stop at saying no. They say, no, I'm focusing on something else right now. Can this
Yes.
wait?
Yes.
And it's not as hard a no or as abrupt a no as saying, no, I'm not doing any of this work, because it feels like, oh, I feel lazy, I feel less productive. But
Yes.
it's once they have that, I think there's a psychological safety that comes with, I'm saying no for the right reasons. I'm doing no
Right.
to protect my capacity, so that the work that I have right now gets the attention it deserves. I'm prioritizing in that way. So I feel that a lot of people, when they're presented with, oh, I've burnt out, and it's like, oh, you need to start saying no more. And without the proper explanation as to why they need to say no or how to say no, then they feel afraid that the idea of saying no to something without understanding why is an attack on that identity that they've built around being a high
Exactly.
achiever.
That's so true. We actually offer a course on saying no, and because for that very reason, because we very few. I mean, if you go through your mental Rolodex now and think of leaders that you work with or have worked with who are elegant and graceful about saying no, most of us can't think of very many people. There just aren't very many that model. We don't have many models in our lives of people who say, I care about this and I care about you, and we can talk about it tomorrow. So we actually, if you go to fastfixcall.com, we can send you a link to this course, but it because it really can feel impossible. How do I say no? How do I protect my calendar? How do I not let another person's emergency turn into a hysteria for me? And I grant you, and I so agree, it seems easy enough to say, but almost impossible on the firing line in our day-to-day work jobs or even our at home. So, but there are strategies, and once it comes down to really understanding what they are, picking from a menu of options that we offer, finding those that work for you, and trying them out. And what people discover pretty quickly is that other people become deeply envious of you. They say, "Oh my God, he said no. How did he do that?" I mean, it's almost like mastering. We were talking about Italian earlier. It's almost like learning another language. How did they do that? But when you think about it, how many people have you ever worked with who are graceful and diplomatic, but say no and protect their calendars and will not allow other people's disorganization or hysteria to confound them? I can think of in my entire business career, and I've been in business for 40 years, two or three people who really had that. So it's not that it's impossible, it's just that it's so much easier to say yes.
Yes, I've had issues with people in the past who, um, because they were so uncomfortable with saying no, they would rather overpromise and underdeliver than to say no, that's too much right now, or no, we do not offer that as a service. They would
Yes.
rather say, oh yes, of course, we'll agree to everything. Let's make the sale, let's close the contract, and then try and figure it out after and realize, oh, we actually can't deliver that.
Yes.
And then that becomes a much more awkward phone call to be like, yes, I know
Exactly.
we agreed to that 6 months ago, but we actually don't do that. You've completely broken the trust, rather than being very upfront and saying, no, we do not deliver that service, but we can look into it and see if we can refer you to someone else, or we can look into it and see if it's a possibility down the line.
Yes.
That helps to
Yes.
maintain the trust, rather than people running away from the fear of rejection or fear of being seen as incompetent,
Yes.
because they don't want to say no to something that's outside of their ability.
Yes. And we all know this. I mean, let's assume for the moment that you and I and everybody who listens to your podcast are very, very smart people. So it's not a question of being smart or even experienced. It's just that when we are in a jam, um, and particularly if we're addicted to this, if all of the momentum goes in the direction of saying yes to everything, um, it's understandable why this would happen. And this is why, your podcast is so valuable, I think, for people to have a speed bump every week and be allowed to consider maybe there's another way. I don't have to go insane with everyone else. I don't have to. And indeed, it's not going to build a better life for me. It's not going to build a better life for my customers, for my family, for anybody. The other part of it is that it's fatal, so that someone will say, "Well, you're not getting. Why aren't you hysterical? You should be as hysterical as I am." The fact that you're not as hysterical as I am means that you don't care and you should be fired. That conversation really doesn't happen except in this 10% of the outliers that I'm talking about. It really doesn't happen. People are just nonplussed for a few minutes and they think, oh, he's not going to light his hair on fire. No matter how much lighter fluid I provide, he's not going to light his hair on fire. How interesting.
Yeah, that was a very interesting point there about um the standard. Oh, he's not meeting me. He's not meeting my standards. The over hours, or the I work to this intensity, so I expect everyone else in my team to work to this intensity too. Oh, they're not showing the same loyalty. Oh, they're not showing the same level of commitment. But
Yes,
it's when you understand uh, that if that's a covert expectation, or if that's a standard that you set for yourself, but don't communicate openly, because it probably doesn't meet the job description or the job requirements, or you could have a very interesting call with HR if you said,
yes,
"Oh well, I know it's not in the job contract, but I expect everyone to stay here till midnight to finish this deadline."
yes,
It's in setting those covert expectations that, and I've covered this in the past before. It's not even a state of burnout, but it's a sense of betrayal within the team, and
exactly.
it feels the same like burnout. It feels like that drain, that misalignment, because someone has betrayed expectations that you have never openly communicated with, but because it
Exactly.
was in your internal narrative and you've been telling yourself this the whole time, and people often think that their team are mind readers in a way, or oh, they must have picked up the message somewhere along the line. If they read between the lines, they'd understand how important this is. But then
Yeah,
they feel betrayed.
exactly. Well, and that's the problem. I mean, the short-term victory may be that we get past whatever sprint we have to get through. The long-term cost, especially today, is that workers are deeply dissatisfied and are so smart. I mean, I think about the people who are listening to this podcast. They are so smart. They have X-ray vision. They know that it's bullshit when someone says, um, "Oh no, but you must you must really work this hard." uh, Somewhere up the line, there's been a lie told someone, you know, someone has overpromised somewhere along the line, and the cascade is now finally upon us. But we lose the trust of the people that work for us instantly. Having had lots of employees for years and years and years, I can see that it's a lie. It's fundamentally a lie. It's that, you should jump into the same psychosis I'm in, that says we can never say no to anyone ever. And, we all know that that's not technically true. It's not even 100% true in business. But once, especially when there is a misbalance of power, if I have if I have power that someone I'm speaking with does not have, then it becomes a real grievous offense. And whether we can articulate it or ever say it out loud, I'm really abusing my power when I inflict my psychosis on anybody else. And that's really what it is. I mean, the definition of psychosis is to believe something that isn't true is true. And when we feel as though not only that I have to suffer from it, but that everyone around me has to suffer from it, uh, everyone around us, but particularly those where we have a disproportionate amount of power, uh, are being deeply harmed and betrayed. That's the truth of it. And that bell you cannot unring. That person will never trust you the same way again, and they shouldn't.
When that happens with leadership and they destroy loyalty in that way, or they destroy trust within the team because, again, they set that COVID expectation, they feel betrayed themselves when the team does not meet that expectation. And then
Yes.
they say, oh, the team has let me down. The team has failed me. Of course, that's going to completely destroy the trust within the team.
Yes.
What is the way to come back from that? Is there a way to come back from that for that leader? And I believe that there can be, but it's going to take a lot of effort and brick by brick. Do many
Yes.
leaders do that, take that effort, or do they take the easy way out?
Well, unfortunately, I have made my share of mistakes, and I have tried to rebuild relationships even after these people weren't working for me or with me anymore. I have part of my own recovery journey has been around trying to track people down who I've betrayed this way, and to make it right. Not for career reasons, but just because it's something I needed to do. And my experience is that, and this is the danger we must all as leaders face, is that we can, in a twinkling, cause grievous harm to the relationship that can never be rebuilt, never be rebuilt. That the as I said, the bell cannot be unrung, and there is not much incentive for people we have harmed in this way or betrayed in this way to trust us again. What's in it for them to do that? What's in it for them to, let's say, forgive us? That may sound like a strong word, but what's in it for them to do that? They can vote with their feet and move to a safer place and a saner place, and they should do. Um, so I think this is the thing that as a leader I've had to live with, is that the consequences of this kind of illness isn't limited to just me, and it isn't just limited to my significant others and my children even, which is a whole other category we could talk about. But when we just think about the people that we lead, there is irreparable harm that is done. It's not insignificant, and sometimes, often, it gets normalized in a corporate environment that the rules in business are different than the rules we might practice at home. but the fact is we can do irreparable harm. And the question is, is that the way we want to live? And can we live with those kinds of consequences? Um, my experience in trying to rebuild relationships is that most of the time you cannot. And I have gone to great lengths um, in a lot of cases to rebuild broken relationships with people that worked for me. And I don't blame them at all, but they are unwilling to, I have offered to try to fix this in any way I possibly can. And understandably, they have said, pass, no, thank you. I would rather not see you or be with you again. And I understand that. And I don't think I'm entitled necessarily to forgiveness or an audience or anything like that. That's their journey. My journey requires that I try to clean it up if I can, and that the desire, the intention to clean it up is worth something. There's a great story by the Dalai Lama, who he told a story about how an old man in his 80s, wanted to become a monk. And the Dalai Lama told him that he could not because he was too old to withstand sitting for 20 hours a day, and that the rigor of being a monk was too much. And this 80-year-old man killed himself. And the thinking he would be reborn as a young man and he could be a monk. And the Dalai Lama was asked, how did you get past that? And he said, I never have. I think about this man every day. And, I think that's where I come out on this. I'm not at all like the Dalai Lama, sadly, but that it doesn't go away. It's a burr under my saddle that I hope stays forever, and that helps me to realize that this is that the consequences are grave, can be dire, not just to me and my family, but to lots of other people, to vendors, to subcontractors, because we feel we can be even more, I don't know, inhumane as the orbit gets farther and farther out. So we've sort of gone down a deeper rabbit hole, Eugene, but this is really what's at stake.
And I think that's something that people overlook, especially in leadership roles. Leaders are so prone to burnout when they're trying to people please and get people to like them all the time, or trying to um, maintain a position of authority. They create, as we've said, they create this persona, and that leaves them prone to burnout. But on the other side of that as well, when they start to spiral, we start to see where they can potentially destroy a lot of relationships because they're not able to handle the pressure. They're going to set covert expectations, feel betrayed, and then take it out on people with sometimes without knowing, just because they're in that state of
Yes.
uh, God knows where their mind is with all the pressure, and then trying to mend those relationships. Again, as you said, like you can make the effort to try and mend that relationship, but you are no way entitled to get that forgiveness or be able to make that amendment over time. And it's understanding how serious that can be, the severity of destroying a relationship and loyalty like that, the effect, and not only in a leader to a team, but also we see it in families, we see it with partners, we see it with wives, we see divorces, all around
Yes.
relationships falling apart because of burnout and people's relationship with their work, the identity that they attach to their work. So that's why I find here on the podcast, the coaching work that we do, helping people to understand their narrative, their relationship with their work, their relationship with their life, the people in their life, how important it is to understand how quickly we can lose that, how quickly we can destroy those relationships and that trust.
Yes.
And by preventing that, being able to understand our values, as we've discussed, understanding your values, aligning everything, and why we do what we do, that we can avoid all that pain.
Yes, the what you said earlier really struck a chord about being about unconsciously doing things. And again, to use the addiction uh, parallel, it's very much like an alcoholic in a blackout doing things that they're not aware of. And this is not in any way to for me or for anyone in burnout to not accept or to shirk responsibility for what they do, but it's like that. And it isn't until, sadly, in retrospect, in my case, years in retrospect, that I've realized, oh my God, what have I done? You know, because my first coach talked to me about the difference between a small A agenda and a large A agenda. And she would often say to me, so are we talking about your small A agenda or your large A agenda? And the large A agenda really is, what do you want people to say about you after you're gone, basically? What do you want your legacy to be? What kind of a life do you want to have? And the problem with burnout is that you're trapped in the small A agenda. And the fact that there even is a small or a large A agenda is invisible or feels dangerous to even consider. Because if I focus at all on the capital A agenda, I will fail at the small A agenda. Not realizing that being committed pathologically to the small A agenda is killing me, and it's killing the people around me. At least it's killing their spirit. And so one of the great blessings of burnout, and that's the way I've chosen to look at it, because there's certainly a lot of pain associated with it for me and for others, is that it requires really to abandon, uh, well, to focus on the large A agenda, and and to really have a life worth living. Um, and and it feels as though I have to give up so much, but you actually don't have to give up anything that matters. Um, and and also, if there is a way to make amends or atone or whatever for this, and I feel as though I'll be doing that for the rest of my life, I'm not preoccupied by it, but I do think of it this way. It's by not doing that again ever. And that may seem like a tall order, and sometimes it really, you have to be very circumspect, but it is definitely worth it. And so when we speak about a life beyond burnout as being immeasurably wonderful as compared to life, if I had achieved only my small A agenda, I would have had a very small life. And and I also would never have understood the beauty of the large A agenda life. That's the only one worth having. So it is beyond burnout is an you incredibly wonderful destination. But there are also some hard truths that come with it.
Scott, thank you for that sharing that, because many people overlook, they share their burnout story, and then they say, but look where I am now. And I love to see the bright side, and where people come to. But what you've brought to light is the hard truth, that there there are relationships that can be destroyed as a result of that spiral. And where do we go from there?
Yes.
And having that small A agenda, as you said, and the harm that causes to your big A agenda, realizing that and understanding the severity of the um what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the as a result of the, oh my god, what my English really is failing me here in Basel. Um, the repercussions,
Yes.
of following the small A agenda
Yes.
to your big A agenda. Now that the big A agenda matters more, or
Yes.
you finally realize that it always mattered more. You mentioned earlier about the fast fix call and all of these steps that we can take, the R and R. If someone was to get started today, what will be the first action that you would recommend for them to help them get on the right path, what's the first thing you would recommend them to do?
Well, the first thing that we recommend, and if you go to fastfixcall.com, we can do this for you, is to take a burnout assessment. We have created an abbreviated version of the Maslach Burnout Inventory, which is a 250 question accepted by the World Health Organization. So you can really understand, am I in burnout or do I just, what is it? So the first thing we do is have people take a burnout assessment so that you can understand what the criteria really is. And and that helps a lot of people because a lot of people figure, well, I'm just lazy. If I worked harder, again, it's always work harder, work harder. If I just worked harder or tried more or cared more, then all my problems would disappear. Um, so that's the first thing. If you go to fastfixcall.com, we'll send you a an online burnout assessment so you can understand not only the criteria for the technical criteria for clinical burnout, but also for you to understand the severity you may or may not have. So that's number one. Number two, if you schedule a call with us, once we understand what your inventory looks like, what your assessment looks like, then we can prescribe some things that you can start using right now today for free. And it's not a complete solution, but what you can do are start with some very microscopic actions that will produce very macro results if you start now. The thing I would just say to anybody who is interested is that this can all end now. Um, I would not have been able to say this 10 years ago when my own journey started, but I can tell you today with great confidence that you can really turn this around and you can turn it around incredibly quickly. Um, but the things that you have tried to this point, if you're like me, are not going to get you there. They simply won't. But there are some things that are proven to work, and we'd love to share them with you today.
Thank you, Scott. That was brilliant.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you, Gene. It's really, I hope it's a comfort to everybody who listens to your podcast, but it's a comfort to me anyway to know that there are kindred spirits out there, and you certainly are one.